Around 1 a.m., a local resident was driving home after finishing a late-night shift at a nearby lumber yard. As he traveled down FM 83, something unusual caught his attention. A vehicle was oddly parked on the shoulder of the road. The car's headlights were still on, casting beams into the dark, and the driver's side door was hanging open. Curious and slightly concerned, he slowed down to get a better look. What he discovered next was nothing short of horrifying. Something so disturbing and unexpected that it shook him to his core. It was a sight unlike anything he had ever witnessed in his life. Without hesitation, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Emergency services responded swiftly. Within minutes, deputies from the Sabine County Sheriff's Office and a team of paramedics were dispatched to the scene. They approached the vehicle cautiously and found a young woman, identified as Livy, slumped in the passenger seat. There were no vital signs. She showed no pulse, no breath, no indication of life. Every crime has its own story, and we're here to tell it to you, our dear viewers. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay with us. Livy Lewis was born in the spring of 1999 in Sabine County, nestled deep within the piney woods of East Texas. Her roots run deep in this quiet, wooded region, where family ties and community values were the cornerstones of everyday life. She was raised in the town of Hemphill, a close-knit and unassuming community where neighbors knew each other by name, and children grew up with both freedom and a strong sense of responsibility. Hemphill wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. It was the kind of place that shaped character in quiet, lasting ways. Livy's family was the kind you'd see sitting together on Sunday mornings at church or gathered around a kitchen table after a long day. Her mother, Darcy Bass, was a steady, loving presence in her life, and her grandmother, Janice Lewis, a retired midwife, held a special place in her heart. These two women were the pillars of Livy's upbringing. Their influence was unmistakable. They taught her compassion not just in words, but through action, caring for neighbors in need, offering support to friends without being asked, and always making time for one another. From an early age, Livy exhibited a kind of quiet depth that made her stand out. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. Instead, she was the type of person others naturally gravitated toward. With her long, dark brunette hair, observant hazel eyes, and an easy, genuine smile, Livy had a presence that lingered in people's minds. She had a soothing voice and a natural inclination to listen more than she spoke, which made others feel both heard and understood. Her demeanor conveyed calmness, and there was an emotional intelligence about her that made her seem older than her years. Friends and teachers often described her as wise beyond her years, a sentiment that echoed across those who knew her. Livy didn't seek popularity. Instead, she built deep and meaningful friendships that stood the test of time. She was generous with her time, offering help without hesitation, and was the type of friend who would show up with a comforting word or a thoughtful gesture at just the right moment. Her values were deeply shaped by her rural upbringing, a life that prioritized faith, hard work, community connection, and resilience. Material wealth was never abundant in the Lewis household, but what they lacked in finances, they more than made up for with emotional support and familial closeness. Their home was filled with warmth, shared meals, laughter, and a sense of shared purpose. Her grandmother, Janice, often spoke about the sacredness of helping others, a lesson Livy absorbed deeply. Even as a teenager, Livy expressed a desire to do something that mattered. It wasn't a passing thought, it was a guiding principle. She would often share this with friends, saying she hoped her life would be of service to others. That vision for her future eventually took shape in the form of a dream, to become a pediatric or neonatal nurse. She wanted to care for the most vulnerable, babies, infants, and young children, those who could not speak for themselves but needed the most attentive care. This aspiration wasn't born out of ambition, but rather from a deep well of compassion. Throughout high school, Livy spent her weekends volunteering at the local church's daycare and regularly offered to babysit for families in the community. Not because she was earning extra money, but because she genuinely loved caring for children. There was something in her spirit that lit up when she was around them. Academically, Livy was a high achiever. At Hemphill High School, she excelled in her studies, maintained honors-level grades, and became an active member of student life. She joined the cheerleading squad and served on the student council. But perhaps her favorite subject was biology. She had an almost poetic fascination with how the human body functioned and how healing could happen, both physically and emotionally. In one class assignment, she wrote, "Healing isn't just about medicine, it's about presence. People begin to heal when they feel seen, heard, and valued." It was this mindset that set her apart even among her peers. After graduating high school, Livy pursued her dream with unwavering determination. She enrolled in college courses and simultaneously worked as a certified nursing assistant, CNA, gaining first-hand experience in healthcare. Her work was physically demanding and emotionally complex, yet she embraced it with open arms. Her coworkers described her as exceptionally reliable, quietly compassionate, and always willing to go the extra mile. If a patient needed an extra blanket or someone to talk to during a difficult moment, Livy noticed, often without being told, and responded with care. She wasn't just fulfilling job duties. She was creating moments of comfort in spaces that could often feel cold and clinical. Her patients remembered her not for how fast she moved through tasks, but for how attentively she looked them in the eyes, spoke with kindness, and treated them with dignity. Her dream of working in neonatal care felt like a natural extension of the person she was becoming. She envisioned a future where she could support fragile newborns and worried parents, helping bring reassurance into some of life's most vulnerable moments. Outside of her professional aspirations, Livy's personal life unfolded like that of many young adults. She experienced the emotional complexities of young love and the vulnerability that often comes with it. In her early 20s, she began a relationship with Matthew Edgar, a young man from the same region. Matthew had a rugged, introspective nature. He worked as a welder, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of physical presence that made people notice when he entered a room. Matthew Edgar was known in Sabine County not only for his trade, but for the quiet intensity he carried. Some respected him for his hard work and craftsmanship. Others kept a cautious distance, sensing something less easily defined beneath the surface. He was 5 years older than Livy Lewis, and when they first met, he seemed steady, confident, someone who knew what he wanted. Their introduction came during the summer of 2019 at a bonfire party on the edge of town. It was one of those humid East Texas nights. The sky lit orange by firelight and the air buzzing with crickets and conversation. Friends say their eyes met across the crowd, drawn together by that immediate magnetic pull so common in early romance. At first, he was charming in the way quiet people sometimes are, measured in his words, but attentive. He offered her his jacket when the wind picked up, brought her a soda without being asked, and listened intently when she spoke. To many, it looked like the beginning of something sweet and genuine. To her family, Matthew made a solid first impression. He was polite in conversation, helped fix little things around the house, and once showed up unexpectedly with flowers for her mother. He even replaced a porch light for her grandmother Janice without saying much, just quietly took out his tools and did it. For a time, it all looked like the kind of relationship any parent would cautiously support. A protective older boyfriend and a hardworking young woman with goals. But over time, subtle shifts began to unsettle those closest to Livy. The changes were gradual at first, nearly imperceptible, until they weren't. Livy, once open and expressive on social media, began to pull back. Photos of her with friends became less frequent. Her once bright captions faded into quiet emojis or disappeared altogether. She seemed less interested in going out, more hesitant when plans were made. Friends noticed how her laugh, previously easy and contagious, now felt more reserved. Even the way she answered her phone changed. She seemed to check over her shoulder more, excuse herself more often, respond with careful brevity. Those closest to her grew concerned. They saw her world shrinking. Beneath what some mistook for intense affection, others recognized the early signs of possessiveness. Matthew's messages, at first sweet and supportive, began to reveal a more complicated emotional tone. His texts could be effusive, filled with declarations of love. But they could also shift quickly, pleading one moment, accusatory the next. He asked where she was, who she was with, and how long she planned to be gone. Friends who once felt welcome around her began to feel subtly pushed away. Even when Livy tried to reassure everyone that things were fine, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Eventually, her relationship with Matthew became emotionally draining. And though it was never publicly volatile, those close to her could sense the undercurrent of control. They feared she was losing her sense of self, becoming more isolated, more withdrawn. When Livy finally decided to end the relationship, those who loved her felt an almost audible sense of relief. It seemed like the beginning of a new chapter, a reclaiming of space, of voice, of peace. Then came Halloween night, October 31st, 2020. It was a Saturday evening in Hemphill, and while other parts of the country celebrated the holiday with elaborate costumes and lively parties, here things were simpler. In this rural town, Halloween was more about children dressed as pumpkins and cowboys, church-sponsored trunk-or-treats, and families gathering quietly in living rooms. The night air carried a faint chill, and a low fog crept through the pine trees. For Livy, the evening began like so many others. She was scheduled to work a shift as a certified nursing assistant, part of her ongoing effort to balance both employment and her educational aspirations in healthcare. Around dusk, she hugged her mother, Darcy, before heading out to her job. "See you later," she said, climbing into her white Dodge Charger. She was tired but in good spirits. Her clinical work had gone well. Her patients were resting. Everything, by all appearances, seemed normal. After her shift, sometime after 7:30 p.m., Livy returned home. She changed clothes, had a light snack, and was getting ready to unwind. But then her phone buzzed. It was a message from Matthew. He asked to see her. He said he just wanted to talk. According to what Livy later texted a friend, he insisted it would only take a few minutes. No fighting, no pressure. He just wanted closure, he claimed. Something about his wording gave her pause. She messaged a close friend, unsure whether she should go. Her friend urged caution. But minutes later, Livy responded to Matthew with a simple, short reply. Okay. They arranged to meet at a secluded stretch of FM 83, a dead-end road bordered by dense forest and far from streetlights or busy intersections. It was a location they'd been to before, remote, private, with poor cell service and limited visibility, the kind of place people used for long conversations or quiet reflection, where headlights were the only sign of human presence. As midnight approached, Livy drove toward the meeting spot. It was just past 12 a.m. when she arrived. Matthew was already there, waiting near the tree line. The road was still and silent, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. He stepped into view as she pulled in, his face mostly shadowed but familiar. She parked, got out of the car, and approached him cautiously. He handed her a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, something handwritten, possibly a note. Livy unfolded it and read quietly, a small, sad smile forming on her face. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by darkness and silence, just two silhouettes in the fog. Shortly after 1 a.m., a local man, an employee at the nearby lumber mill, was driving home from a late shift. He noticed a white vehicle parked oddly on the side of FM 83. Its headlights were still on, casting long beams into the trees. The front driver's side door was open. What the driver saw next would remain seared in his memory forever. It was the kind of sight that turns the world suddenly, irrevocably quiet, eerie in its stillness. At first glance, the white Dodge Charger appeared simply abandoned, its headlights cutting through the fog, illuminating the shoulder of FM 83 like ghostly sentinels. But as he stepped closer, the silence gave way to something much more disturbing. The front driver's side door was ajar. Inside, Unmoving in the passenger seat was a young woman still belted in place. Her phone lay untouched in her purse on the floorboard. It was a scene that didn't scream chaos, but whispered tragedy. Shaken, the man backed away, heart pounding. He dialed 911 with trembling hands. His voice cracked as he gave the dispatcher the details. A vehicle, a young woman, not moving. No one else around. Something was very wrong. And he was sure of one thing. This wasn't an accident. Within minutes, Sabine County Sheriff's deputies and EMS personnel were on their way. First responders arrived swiftly, navigating the rural roads with urgency. The paramedics were the first to reach the car, headlights from their vehicle spilling onto the roadside like stage lights on a frozen scene. Livy Lewis was found in the passenger seat. Her seatbelt remained fastened. There were no signs of a struggle inside the car, no broken windows, no signs of impact, no evidence of a crash. Despite their best efforts, paramedics could do nothing. Livy was already gone. The estimated time of death, determined later by medical examiners, was approximately 12:58 a.m., no more than 15 minutes before the Good Samaritan had found her. The timing chilled investigators. Whoever had been with her was gone, by seconds or maybe just minutes. The proximity of the discovery to the estimated moment of death made one thing painfully clear. This had not been a planned disappearance. It was sudden, jarring, and devastatingly final. Deputies immediately cordoned off the area. Floodlights were brought in. Crime scene tape was stretched across the two-lane road, and markers were placed with precision. The Charger was secured and later towed to a forensic processing lot under strict supervision. Investigators wanted no room for contamination. Every detail mattered now. Her student ID badge was still clipped to the center console, visible like so many signs of her ambition. Her purse remained closed beside her, its contents undisturbed. Nothing had been taken. Her jewelry, small, delicate pieces she wore daily, was still in place. To those trained in criminal investigation, the message was clear. This was not a robbery. This was not a random act. It was calculated, intentional, personal. What puzzled detectives even more was the unnerving calmness of the scene. The Charger wasn't damaged. The cabin was tidy. No shattered glass. No forced entry. No footprints leading up to the driver's side window. And yet, just outside the open door, they found one crucial clue: a single spent rifle casing. Lying in the dewy grass, it glinted under the forensic lights, evidence that something terrible had occurred right there, feet from the edge of the road. Nearby, faint impressions in the ground showed someone had been pacing, back and forth in short, tense lines. As officers swept the area with flashlights and infrared scanners, they discovered a set of footprints veering off into the nearby woods. The tracks were deep enough to suggest hurried movement, but they led nowhere conclusive. Whoever had left them was gone. And if they'd been carrying something, it was no longer with them. No weapon was found, no second vehicle, no discarded clothing. The footprints simply ended, as though the person had vanished into the trees. Inside the Charger's rear compartment, investigators noted boot scuff marks on the carpet. Unusual, considering Livy had been found in the front seat. The marks suggested that someone had entered or exited through the back. But again, there were no signs of a second occupant in the front. Whoever had been there had taken great care to leave few traces behind. It was eerie in its precision, as if someone had orchestrated the entire event to be quick, clean, and hard to trace. Less than 24 hours after the discovery, rumors spread rapidly across Hemphill. Word reached law enforcement that Livy had made contact with someone that night, someone she knew, someone she had agreed to meet just briefly. That person, according to friends, was Matthew Edgar. He had not called 911. He had not contacted anyone in her family. And by the time officers arrived, he was nowhere to be seen. Or so it seemed. Just 50 yards from the scene, officers conducting a grid search found something unexpected. In the tall grass near the edge of the woods, curled into a fetal position, was a man, disoriented, silent, awake, but distant. It was Matthew Edgar. He did not flee. He did not speak. He lay there, clutching nothing, barely responding to questions. Beside him in the grass was a rifle. Officers called for backup and secured the weapon. Edgar was conscious but detached, as though disconnected from the moment. When spoken to, he didn't resist, but offered no immediate explanation. He was taken into custody for questioning. No formal charges had been filed yet, but suspicion among authorities was immediate and unavoidable. At the station, Edgar's demeanor was strange, flat at times, erratic at others. When questioned about the evening's events, his story fluctuated. At one moment, he claimed not to remember anything. At another, he vaguely suggested Livy had fallen. When asked to clarify, he couldn't. His eyes darted around the room. His speech was hesitant. He referred to Livy in the past tense, repeatedly asking officers, "Am I going to jail forever?" When investigators inquired directly about the weapon, he grew quiet. Standard protocol followed. He was tested for gunshot residue. The results came back positive. Toxicology reports confirmed that Edgar had alcohol in his system, enough to impair his judgment, but not enough to explain a complete memory blackout. Investigators noted this detail carefully. Impairment did not equal amnesia, and inconsistencies in his statements began stacking up. He seemed aware of key details, but only selectively. His timeline shifted. His explanations contradicted known evidence. Back at the scene, forensics teams examined tire tracks, or rather the absence of them. There were no skid marks, no indication that Livy had attempted to flee. Analysts suggested that she had been stationary at the time of the incident, seated, possibly turning to look at someone outside the driver's side window. What puzzled detectives was the apparent absence of clear motive, at least initially. Livy had no known enemies. There was no sign of robbery. But there was one critical detail. She had spent part of the night before with Matthew Edgar. They had been seen together at a Halloween gathering with mutual friends. Eyewitnesses said the two seemed to be arguing at one point. One partygoer recalled seeing Livy storm out and Edgar follow close behind. Investigators began tracking the timeline of her final hours. Around midnight, Livy and Edgar left the party together. Friends later told police that Livy had seemed hesitant, conflicted about leaving with him, but also worried about making a scene. Edgar's behavior was described as possessive, his mood shifting from affectionate to angry within moments. This wasn't the first time. In the weeks leading up to Halloween, Livy had confided in a close friend that she was starting to feel trapped in the relationship. She said she was trying to end things, but that it was complicated. She hadn't shared much more than that, just enough for her friends to worry. After leaving the party, the couple drove off into the darkness. What happened next remains a matter of partial reconstruction and educated theory. Sometime between 2 and 4 a.m., authorities believe a violent argument broke out in the car. Whether the vehicle was parked at the time of the attack as investigators gathered evidence, they began to suspect that the murder was not a crime of passion, but premeditated. Friends came forward with texts from Matthew in the days leading up to Livy's death. In one message, he told a friend, "I can't let her go. If she's with someone else, it's over for me." In another, just 2 nights before the meeting, he wrote cryptically, "If it ends my way." Autopsy results confirmed what the officers already suspected. Even more unsettling, investigators found no evidence that Matthew had brought his phone to the scene. They believe he turned it off and left it at home, possibly to avoid GPS tracking. This level of calculation chilled everyone involved in the case. In the weeks that followed, forensic teams reconstructed the final minutes of Livy's life using data from her phone, GPS records. Her text history ended abruptly around 12:45 a.m., just moments before the shooting. The last message, sent to a friend, simply read, "I'm okay. Just finishing up now." Investigators believe she sent that message while sitting in the car with Edgar, unaware of what was to come. Digital forensics recovered fragments of deleted messages. In one unsent note, she had typed, "I can't keep doing this." That message was time-stamped 12:54 a.m. Security footage from a local gas station showed the couple purchasing drinks just hours before Livy was killed. He appeared calm. She looked tense. Eyewitnesses reported seeing them together, and a video captured them in the vehicle, with Edgar sitting in the driver's seat and Livy beside him. This would later become critical to prosecutors trying to establish a timeline of events and location. What happened after Livy's death painted a chilling picture of Matthew Edgar. Authorities believe he remained at the scene for several minutes, standing outside the car, staring at her body. Tire impressions suggested he had parked nearby but fled on foot. Whether it was panic, calculation, or both, he disappeared into the woods without a trace. They had driven together in her car to the edge of the highway, just far enough from town that no one could hear. Law enforcement would later uncover even darker truths. After Livy's death, detectives obtained a search warrant for Edgar's phone and social media accounts. What they found was chilling. Hundreds of messages, many angry and erratic, others disturbingly obsessive. In one, he told her, "If I can't have you, no one will." In another, "You don't know what I'm capable of." They weren't just idle threats. Livy's death sent shockwaves through East Texas. In a region where violent crime was rare, the murder of a nursing student, a hometown girl with a bright future, struck a chord. Memorials sprang up overnight. Her classmates lit candles at a vigil on campus. Her church held a service that Sunday. Hundreds showed up, many wearing lavender ribbons, Livy's favorite color. The forensic evidence was building. The blood on Edgar's clothes matched Livy's DNA. The weapon found near him was traced back to a friend of his, one who had reportedly let Edgar borrow it weeks earlier for target practice. The trajectory of the bullet aligned with Edgar's position. It wasn't one thing that tied him to the murder. It was everything. 1,000 small pieces coming together to form a picture of a relationship that had turned deadly. Edgar's family home was searched under warrant, and investigators seized multiple firearms, electronics, and clothing items. A neighbor reported seeing Edgar in the early hours of Halloween morning, walking alone down a back road. His clothes were muddy, and he looked dazed. That was the last confirmed sighting. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Edgar was not formally charged with murder for several weeks. In that time, he remained free. He returned to his home, attended local events, even showed up at Livy's memorial service. Friends and family whispered in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the sight of him mourning publicly. And yet, even with all the evidence pointing directly to Edgar, the legal process moved slowly. COVID-19 had delayed the court systems. Grand juries met infrequently. Edgar was initially released on a bond of $50,000, an amount shockingly low for someone linked to a homicide. Darcy Bass was outraged. "He killed my daughter and he's walking free," she told reporters. Prosecutors argued for a higher bond, but the judge, citing a lack of formal charges at the time, kept the original terms. The Lewis family began to fear what many dared not say aloud, that Livy's killer might never be held accountable. While Edgar waited for the indictment, he returned to his grandparents' house, stayed off social media, and refused to talk to reporters. After more than a year of delays, Matthew Edgar's murder trial was finally scheduled for late January 2022. The case would be tried in San Augustine County due to concerns about local bias in Sabine County. The prosecution prepared a straightforward narrative. Edgar, enraged and controlling, shot Livy during an argument in his truck and left her body on the side of a rural road. The evidence was physical, circumstantial, and damning. But just as the trial was set to begin, on February 1st, 2022, something unthinkable happened. Edgar didn't show up. He had vanished. The courtroom erupted in confusion. Family members of Livy Lewis were stunned. Prosecutors scrambled to notify law enforcement. The presiding judge issued an immediate bench warrant for Edgar's arrest, and local deputies were dispatched to his last known address, his grandparents' home near Hemphill. They found nothing but an empty room. Edgar had vanished. His ankle monitor, intended to track his location as a condition of his bail, had gone dead. Authorities believed he had cut it off and fled. Incredibly, the trial continued in his absence. Under Texas law, a defendant who willfully absconds can be tried in absentia. And so, for the next 5 days, the courtroom proceeded as if Edgar were seated right there in the defense chair, even though it sat empty. Jurors heard testimony from friends, forensic experts, law enforcement, and Livy's mother. The prosecution detailed how Edgar had threatened Livy, how his behavior had become increasingly erratic, and how his story didn't match the physical evidence. They showed texts, played voicemails, and introduced autopsy results. Despite a murder charge, despite the graphic forensic evidence, and despite his prior violent behavior, Edgar's bond had not been revoked. Prosecutors had warned the judge that Edgar posed a danger, but the court allowed him to remain free, provided he appeared each day for the proceedings. The manhunt began immediately. A BOLO, be on the lookout alert, was issued. Search parties and drones scoured wooded areas. Law enforcement agencies from across Texas, including the Texas Rangers, the U.S. Marshals Service, and local sheriff's departments, launched a coordinated effort to track Edgar down. They searched nearby towns, combed through cell tower pings, and followed tips about possible sightings. For weeks, helicopters buzzed over forested properties. Dogs tracked scents through creek beds and abandoned hunting camps. Billboards featuring Edgar's photo loomed over highways, bearing the words, "Wanted for murder." How does a convicted murderer disappear in a place where everyone knows everyone? One theory: Edgar had help. In the days following his disappearance, investigators questioned several of Edgar's friends and extended relatives. Some were uncooperative, others claimed ignorance. But it was clear from the beginning that Edgar had planned his escape. He had likely been preparing for weeks, if not longer. He knew where the patrols would look first. He knew the terrain. He even seemed to know when to move and when to vanish again, always staying just ahead of those tracking him. As local media buzzed with suspicion, pressure mounted. Families and community members wanted answers, and fast. The Sabine County Sheriff's Office held a press conference 3 days after the murder, stating, "We have strong evidence linking Mr. Edgar to the scene," Sheriff Maddox said. "He is considered armed and dangerous. We call upon the public to aid us." The announcement escalated the manhunt. Tip lines flared. Videos from gas stations and highways in neighboring Louisiana were checked. Border surveillance equipment was tapped. The case became not just a homicide investigation, but a top priority manhunt. Billboards went up across East Texas offering rewards: $10,000, then $15,000, for any information leading to Edgar's arrest. By summer 2022, the FBI joined the case. U.S. Marshals added Edgar to their 15 most wanted in Texas list, highlighting him as armed and dangerous. Tips now stretched across state lines. One reported sighting came from as far away as Louisiana, another from Oklahoma. But Edgar remained one step ahead. In October 2022, a break came. But it wasn't what anyone expected. Border Patrol agents in southern Texas reported a vehicle abandoned near a private ranch not far from the Rio Grande. Inside, they found clothes, maps, and a phone registered to a distant cousin of Edgar's. Surveillance footage from a nearby store appeared to show a man matching Edgar's description buying supplies days earlier. The implication was clear. He may have been trying to cross into Mexico. That revelation added a new international dimension to the case. U.S. Marshals coordinated with Mexican authorities to monitor known cartel-controlled crossings, but no further sightings emerged. Some believed he had made it across. Others believed he died trying. The FBI issued an Interpol Red Notice, essentially a global arrest alert, in early 2023. placing Edgar on international watch lists. Posters were distributed across border regions in both English and Spanish. Tips came from Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and even as far as Costa Rica. But again, nothing verifiable. Just shadows and echoes. On May 29, 2023, a ranch worker in southern Arizona contacted authorities after spotting a man sleeping near an irrigation canal. The man had a beard, was malnourished, and had a homemade tattoo reading LL under his collarbone. Livye's initials. He initially gave a false name, but later confessed under pressure. Matthew Edgar had been captured. His arrest made national news. He was returned to Texas under heavy guard, no longer a missing man, but an infamous fugitive. This time, there would be no bail. He was remanded directly to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Matthew Edgar was convicted of murder in the shooting death of Livy Lewis and sentenced to 99 years in prison in the Caulfield Unit, a maximum security prison in East Texas. For Livy's family, it wasn't closure, but it was a measure of justice.